We bought the building, remodeled it. Looks nothing like it used to.
The ugliest Christmas sweater I've ever seen.
Me too.
That's the ending of our trailer. Mitchell County Regional Health Center. I'm here with Jess Clayton.
Yep.
And you are a forensic nurse.
I am. Yep. I started becoming a forensic nurse back in 2013, and I work here as well as up in Minneapolis as well.
So I know we'll be talking about a little bit about forensic nursing and diving into the sexual assaults and all that stuff. But how are you guys managing here during the whole feed of COVID with different variances going on? And I know that's not exactly your field, but how's it going here? People, that's one of the first questions I get.
Absolutely.
Anything with Mitchell County Regional Health Centers, how's everything going there? So tell me.
So I do work in the ER too, and med surg. And I work with patients too that are coming like as a rehab. So we see more of our COVID patients that are past COVID, and then we'll do rehab here. What we have been seeing though is kind of a busy ER. We have seen as our outpatients as well, it's been a little bit on the higher side, patients trying to get medications to help with COVID. And so, yeah, those have been kind of keeping us a little busy.
I'm sure everyone around the country, I think, well, everyone around the world.
Everywhere. There's not a single ER, I don't think, that hasn't been hit with it, I guess.
And the one thing I learned about you talking a little bit before we came on here is you're a Wisconsinite. Well, at least you were.
I was.
I knew there was a reason why I liked you a little bit more.
See, all good people come from Wisconsin.
See, hear that? Darn right. Now we're Iowans, of course.
Yes.
You came from Two Rivers.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about your background. So you grew up in Wisconsin, obviously ended up here.
I did. So I'm one of 9 kids in my family.
You grew up on a farm?
No. And I'm not Catholic either. So,
Jeez, Mom and Dad were just busy.
Well, we come from a blended family.
Okay.
My dad worked at the nuclear plant there in near Two Rivers. And then I moved here when I was about 17, 18 years old.
Here as in here?
Osage, yep. And then ended up marrying a guy from here. So now I've just stayed here.
And you like it, obviously?
I do. I still, call Wisconsin my home, but I also call Iowa my home. So.
Well, I forget too. I'd have to look it up. How big Two Rivers and Osage, obviously they're different.
Very
because
different.
You got Two Rivers that you could be on the west part of Two Rivers, right along I-43, and it could be 80. And you get right on, I can't remember what the, obviously not the lake, but the beach is called there, right in Two Rivers.
Lake Michigan.
No, the beach. There's an actual beach.
Neshoto.
Yes.
Neshoto Beach.
One of the nicest beaches in Wisconsin. It could drop in mid-spring to 45.
Absolutely. We were never warm. And, as kids, we would go swimming out in Lake Michigan and have absolutely no feeling in our legs most days because it was so cold. But
it's like that, I think, into July anyway.
But, definitely.
All right, let's talk. So ART is Assault Response Team.
Yes.
Talk to me about this.
So we kind of found a problem, not necessarily a problem, but more of a barrier for people to get any type of help, whether it's for domestic abuse, sexual assault, human trafficking. People don't realize, like in small towns, that we actually have resources. So myself, along with a coworker who went through the same training I did for the adult piece, just to kind of find ways, I guess, to try to get the word out better. So we thought maybe if we branded ourselves, gave ourselves a name, gave ourselves resource numbers, phone numbers, a place for people to actually reach out. And then also we decided, within talking, we have people from the hospital that's on staff on our team. And actually one of our sexual assault nurses is a nurse practitioner as well. And so we kind of came up with this concept to be able to reach the community a lot better and also have a better way of our response to those situations. And so that people don't have to be afraid to come and see us or reach out or even know that there's something here that they can utilize for help.
And it's fascinating to me. I was talking to Elaine Barreca, who does a lot of public relations and does a lot for the hospital, obviously, here. That there's only 3 forensic nurses in the whole state of Iowa. Right?
Well,
is that true? Somewhat true?
What happens is there's more than that. But where it gets kind of, where the numbers are not the best is so as a forensic nurse, we have to go through training. So for example, for the adult course, I had to go through 43 hours of training, plus I had to do hands-on, plus I had to do a bunch of other things. And then for pediatrics, I had to go through another 43 as well. What happens is that we have the opportunity to get certified in those aspects, and there's only 5 of us in the whole state who are actually dual certified.
I knew that was right.
Yeah. So there's 5 of us that are dual certified. There's only like 15 that are certified for adult, and there's only like 7 certified for pediatrics.
Okay, so lots of training involved here.
Yeah.
So you have 5 in the state. What kind of training goes into all of this to make you that kind of person to stand out compared to the others?
Sure. So what they require is for me to course classes for each entity. And then we had to do some kind of a hands-on, 2-day course or whatever to learn how to collect evidence, learn how to take care of patients in these situations. And then for me to keep up my certification on it, you don't necessarily need to be certified to work in this field, but it just looks a lot better because when we may get called to court, it looks better knowing that I did the extra mile to get this certification, which they're not easy tests. I'm
sure
not gonna lie. No, they're awful.
Well, and I even think about the nursing part of it too in college. You're obviously, you're a nurse, you went through the college. For a bachelor's degree, they always said that's the toughest degree to get through.
Oh,
I had weather. We had a lot of calculus and physics, and they still said all the chemistry that's involved in being nurses.
And this one actually, when I took my NCLEX test, all these tests I did pass to begin with, but I almost think that these certification ones were harder than my NCLEX tests. They were that bad.
I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing.
They were hard.
Yeah.
They were very, very hard. It really, pushed my limits and tested my knowledge and whatnot. But I did pass them. So, but to keep up that certification, I have to have, 32 hours of continuing ed, and then I have to work over 300 hours in that field. Which it works because I'm on call pretty much 24/7 here, and then working up in the cities kind of helps keep my hours in check so that I can continue.
So where does the interest come from? Number one, from nursing overall, but secondly, for forensic nursing.
Sure. So it kind of started out when I worked in the ER full time. We actually had a case that came in one time, and there was no forensic nurses back then. None of us had ever even heard that that was a possibility. And we had a sexual assault come in that if I were to look through my chart now, I think I would probably be in tears and cry because it was just handled differently than now. It's kind of one of those you don't know what you don't know type of things. And the whole case was horrible. And so when there was a call that was put up by Iowa City, the hospital there, and looking for, free nursing classes, free, anything free kind of sparks your interest. But when I saw that there was this forensic nurse program, it kind of made me think of that assault that wasn't handled the way that I felt like needed to be handled. And so that call kind of came out, and I just felt like I needed to do it. And then once I got more into it, I turned into a huge passion of mine, and helping, anybody that's in those type of situations. That's why we get into nursing to begin with, is to help people. And this one seemed like really my calling. And from like 2013 all the way until last year, I was the only one in this whole county that did that. And so finally starting to get some other nurses that are interested in but
I'm amazed by it though, that it was just 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Think about all the time and all the, the victims that had to go through all that stuff without any type of forensic nursing. What kind of cases have you seen?
So I see a variety, obviously. So I see some domestic assaults, child abuse assaults. I'm really the only one around here from all the way to Waterloo that can actually see pediatric patients. So I do get called in for pediatric cases as well. I do see an assault of any age, really. We just started doing some I don't know what the word for it is, trying to do some pre-screenings on some of our teenagers as well in the ER, just because of the concern for human trafficking and, you know, what people think human trafficking is. And so we're trying to kind of help prevent that. We also are doing some other things too, where some indicators in the bathroom. So if people, you know, want to divulge some kind of abuse situation, we have ways for them to do that. So then I'd get called in for those cases as well.
So this is an interesting question, because I read it and I'm like, and I'm thinking while you're responding to this, like, you know, us as humans, we think in certain ways, right? So,
Sure.
you know, what are some of the stereotypes people think of when it comes to abuse or human trafficking?
Yep.
You know, we all have this, it has to be this, or it has to be this,
that.
or, you know, everything is in a cardboard box and it's perfect parallel.
Right.
But you see, it's not, right? I mean,
It's not.
So tell us what types, or, you know,
So
start with the stereotypes, I think,
sure.
because obviously you have your domestic, you have some stuff that happened in families, you have human trafficking.
Yeah.
Those are probably big ones, but what are some others?
So, you know, when it comes to domestics, you know, people don't think that that happens, obviously, which we know that that is not the case. You know, I'm trying to think of some stereotypes when it comes to that, but, you know, offhand, I think domestic violence happens to anybody, any age. It doesn't matter, you know, income status. It doesn't matter social status. It doesn't matter anything. You know, sexual assault, you know, what we see a lot of with stereotypes there is that, you know, as I guess one of my biggest frustrations is the victim shaming and blaming, because, you know, if the person was on drugs, if they're on alcohol, you know, depending on how the person dressed, what activities they were involved in, there's a lot of victim shaming that comes through it. And so obviously with the media too, you know, seeing a lot of these people getting off of any type of assaults, are getting out of being in trouble for that because they were the good citizen school kid. You know, I think of like that Brock who, you know, pretty much got out of raping a girl just because he was, you know, college student, straight A, swimmer, whatever else.
Well, I think, remember the big case too with Duke back in, when was that, 2001, 2002, the lacrosse?
The whole team.
And the whole team. And that was kind of the first case that really came out that I think started to open this up.
It does.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought that immediately.
And unfortunately, then those kind of cases make it so that people don't want to come in because they don't think that it's, it doesn't pay to talk about it because nothing is going to happen because of who the person is. We also, you know, small town, I think people are afraid to say anything too because they may know somebody, that person may know somebody. They may be a big name in town and nobody will believe them. And, you know, what I tell people is that statistically, there's only 4% of false accusations for all rape cases out there. So anytime anybody comes in and tells me that they were raped, I'm going to believe them. And really, you know, numbers are so terrible. You know, only 68% ever go to even report because they're afraid of, you know, who they're going to talk to. They're afraid of how they're going to be seen. You know, so there's a lot that kind of goes around with it. Like, again, victim shaming is just one of the downfalls of when it comes to sexual violence.
You hear that all the time, don't you? I mean, it's just, she shouldn't have wore that.
She shouldn't have dressed
she shouldn't have
like
been,
that.
she shouldn't have been in this
drinking.
situation, or she,
Mm-hmm. And we find a lot too, where there is a huge debate, you know, between, well, did she make up the story or did she try to get him in trouble and make it up?
Or over-exaggerate.
Exactly. And again, you know, when I say, okay, only 4% of all, you know, accusations are false. So you tell me, you know. And so it's really hard because, you know, people that are victims of that, it just seems like they get dragged through the mud just as bad, and it's not an easy process. And even for like district attorneys to even take the cases, you know, they see it as a he said, she said thing. And so if there's alcohol or drugs involved, it makes it even 10 times worse. And I think too that with all those awesome crime shows that I watch, they always have to have DNA to prove a case. Well, I can tell you this, not every case that I've had am I going to get DNA, you know? And so it's really tough because people think that there has to be DNA for it to be proven. So that's kind of tough on our forensic world. When it comes to human trafficking, that's a whole nother ball game. People automatically, when I say human trafficking, you know, they think it's the white van, pick them up in the middle of the night, kidnap them, and throw them into the sex trade, which we know does happen. But for the most part, most of these people go home every single night. Average age for that is about 11 to 14 years old is the average age for when it first started, when it first starts. The internet has not helped the situation by any means, because that's kind of how they target these kids. A lot of parents don't even know what's going on in their homes. We know that, you know, I tell everybody that if your community has drugs in it, you probably have human trafficking in it as well. And so, you know, the stereotype of us being in a small town and not having it is very false.
So you think it's happening right in this community?
I do.
What, I mean, I have so many questions that I could ask at this point. So it starts at 11 to 14.
Yes.
And you say it starts on the internet.
A lot of it can, yeah. That's one of the targets. They also go to, a lot of the traffickers will go to like community places where kids tend to hang out. And they tend to find the most vulnerable youth that they can. And they can kind of tell, you know, the kids that are, you know, a little bit more in trouble or, you know, running away. We had a case up in the cities where we had 2 young girls that ran away, and within the first 20 minutes, their first human traffickers picked them up within 20 minutes.
So what's, and we don't have to get into grave detail with this, but what's the process then like, as you say, some actually go home. These girls did not, but they're going in, human trafficking. Obviously, there's some type of sexual relationship of some sort that occurs, and then they go home at night, but they're still tied to the human trafficking. So people that are watching, give them a little bit of insight.
How that works is, so there's a lot of grooming that kind of goes into this. So they will find somebody that's vulnerable, whether it be on the internet, and they, you know, pose themselves as somebody completely different, and they start promising them things. You know, like I tell my kids, if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And so they start promising these kids, you know, whatever it is. So whether it be love, shelter, money, gas cards, drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, you know, whatever these kids are looking for, they get them to believe that they'll get them whatever they want. And then the problem is they get them going, and then these kids form a relationship actually with their trafficker, because it seems to them as a parental figure or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, because we know that women are traffickers as well. They will promise them the world, and then there's a price at the end. And so that price at the end is they sell them for sex. And then there's always a debt that's never going to be repaid, because there's always something more. You know, a lot of times what we see is most of these kids, they end up hooking them to some kind of a drug. And so then to feed their addiction, this is how they have to pay for that, is by having sex with other people. And what makes it tough to prosecute some of those type of cases is some of these kids don't realize that that's a form of trafficking. Or they don't feel like they can get out of it because of this debt. A lot of times too, the traffickers will threaten either like their family or their pets, or, you know, like when I go and talk to the high school students, I'll say, okay, everybody open up your phone, take a look at it. Look in your pictures. if I were to tell you that if you don't do this, this, and this, I'm going to hurt that person in your family, or I'm going to hurt that person there, what would you do? So a lot of these kids, you know, they threaten that they're going to hurt their siblings or their parents or whatnot, and so they don't get out of it. They also, we're finding up in the cities where they are teaching them to be very against, like, police officers, teachers, doctors, lawyers, because they'll have people that are in those sex rings that are part of those professions. With the police officers, you know, they'll even have somebody impersonate a police officer and have them beat them or something like that, so they learn not to trust a police officer. So it's very, very hard to get them to ever come forward with it.
So obviously we can talk about what can be done at the end and some difficulties and all that, but specifically for someone watching, especially parents, what are some of the warning signs that they can see?
Sure. So a lot of things that we tell parents is, you know, look at, do they have any weird tattoos or markings? I always say too, because I know that we tend to see some youth that do self-harm. And one of the things that traffickers are actually doing is causing self-harm marks to make it look like the kid is doing it themselves, to get them to be afraid.
There's a lot of manipulation going on here.
A lot. So one of the things that we always, you know, are trying to educate, like our ER staff or our staff in the clinic, is asking not why did you do that or who did that to you. So maybe that they'll maybe feel free to come forward. Other things that I have seen are different tattoos. A lot of traffickers will tattoo or brand the person that they have underneath of them. We even have heard of microchips. So they're using those dog microchips and chipping girls with them so that they can find them, you know, wherever they go. So we look for those. If they have multiple cell phones, hotel key cards, if they have a lot of those. One of the things too, there's a lot of lingo. So I know some of the famous words out there like daddy and, you know, those sort of things. A lot of youth are using those terms, but they're actually human trafficking terms. So if they're using more of those type of terminology, I know kids are obsessed with money and whatnot, but when we have kids that are very obsessed with it because they have to make some certain kind of a quota, we are asking more of those type of questions, like, why are you making that? Or are you able to keep your own money? Are you able, does anybody, you know, if they come in and to the ER, for example, and they have a cell phone and they can't put that cell phone down because somebody else is listening on to the other line, we have to always look to make sure that they have a way to get rid of that cell phone so that they can be private, because a lot of traffickers won't even let them go into the doctors without letting them hear. We always too, in the ER world too, are always trying to check to see who the person is with them too, because a lot of times they'll portray themselves as somebody different. So like an aunt or an uncle or a friend, and here it's their trafficker. So we're trying to separate our patients so that they have the ability to come and talk to us if they need to.
Is there a feeling sometimes too when you're in that situation, like, yeah, something's just not right? Have you you've been in those situations before?
Absolutely. Yep. I've had that. I've had situations where a patient didn't even know what town she was in, had no idea where she was, what state we were in. And so right away, of course, you know that my ears perk up and I start worrying and whatnot, because how does somebody not know what city they're even in? And with these kids that are going home every night, you know, what's crazy about the whole thing is we're finding even teenagers are doing it to each other. So like, if I wanted to make a few extra bucks, I could tell my girlfriend or my boyfriend that if you love me, this is what you're gonna do. And you know, we have so many people that are so wanting love and that attention that they'll do just about anything for it. I actually went to a seminar, and the youngest trafficker they talked about was a 12-year-old who, you know, was getting money from his mom's daycare, having, you know, the daycare kids performing, you know, different things on other kids for money, you know, so it's just unreal. And I think too that people think, like prostitution. They think prostitution, is just these poor women are getting, they're getting put in jail. They're the ones that are getting in trouble. But what they're not realizing is prostitution is human trafficking. They have somebody that's making all the money behind them. Usually, pimps are making $34,000 a month, where their person that they're trafficking is like $15 a month. So everybody wants to look at, prostitution as being, the worst of the worst, when it's really these women that, or men or kids that are in situations that they can't get out of.
So you talked a little bit about the age, as young as 12.
Yeah.
How long does this trend continue? Is there for better terms, like promotions that go on in here? What's the ring completely look like? So talk about the ages, how long it lasts, and
sure, the
overall ring.
So it's tough because trying to get people to come forward to say that they were human trafficked there's a lot of research out there, and I'm not sure how much of it is actually accurate, just because of how hard it is to get these people to talk about it. Some people can be in it for years, 20, 30 years. When they're to the point that they're on the streets is kind of the end game for most of them, because that's not the high dollar, I guess, is what some of these other entities get. Lifespan for some of these kids, I don't know. It's hard to say. It could be a short time, and it could be a really long time. I talked to a gal that was in it for over 20 some years.
And I think a lot of these either lead to obviously drug addiction, homelessness, ultimately, yeah. Yeah,
a lot of them end up dead. Yeah. And unfortunately, the ones that end up dead, most people think that was just another hooker, so I look into it, and that's the price of being in that field, thinking that it was something that they chose to be in. When
the shame,
it's
the shame game again.
Absolutely.
But the other side
blaming.
Of it. Yeah. Why is it so difficult for people to seek help? I mean, if you're in that ring and it almost becomes day to day, people not listening,
believing you.
A
lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of the thought, with any of these things, with domestic abuse, with, sexual abuse, there's a lot of shame to it. And they themselves feel like they were the cause of all of this. I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have done that. And so then it turns into, something a lot bigger that they just can't come into. There is the safety feature, especially for human trafficking and domestic, is who's ever doing it to them is probably going to do that to them again. And so the fear of, if I try to get out, if the fear I try to do this, a lot of times we have to be very, very careful how we word things, especially like with our domestic patients. And, maybe they just want to come in and get a quick checkup. But if I were to, give them a card and say, here's some help for you, and the person at home finds that card, their life, that could be an end sentence for them. And so, and there's also the financial piece to it too. So, somebody who's in a domestic abuse situation, they may not be able to leave because they have been trained to be at home, take care of the home. They have no money, they have no income, their kids are threatened, something to that effect. And so they can't leave. When it comes to human trafficking, a lot of times they just don't think they can leave because their trafficker will make it so that they don't leave because that's a big income for them. And so they will do whatever it takes for them not to leave. So there's a lot of fear tactics used in a lot of avenues to report it.
So what can we do? So you're obviously doing a big part, being a forensic nurse.
Sure.
Having this initiative, but I think about people like myself or community leaders, local level, state level, national level. What are we doing to prevent some of these things? And what can we keep doing to make it better for them?
The biggest thing is just believing. I think that's a lot of, believing when somebody comes and talks to you about it. I think a lot of times too, talking about, hey, you don't have to be in this. There are resources out there to help you. I know that there's a lot of work that's going on, like for the human trafficking side of things. I know we just, are getting some bills that not just, but there has been bills within the last 10 years, that talk about human trafficking and trying to push that through. It just seems like everything moves so slow though. I don't know why, but it seems to. But just lobbying for these patients, I guess when you hear certain comments about, well, that girl deserved it because of this and this and this, just trying to be advocates for that. And just reminding people that, these people are human and they deserve, respect, and they deserve to be treated as such. And it doesn't matter, like I tell the high school students, I don't care if you come into my ER and you tell me you were running around butt naked, high on drugs and alcohol, I'm going to treat you, the same, and you didn't deserve this. And the one thing too that's kind of nice is that we have gotten it so that no crime can be. So for example, a teenager, they can come into the ER and they could be drunk, they could be high. There is nothing that they can come in with that will put it so that they have a crime against them, if that makes sense.
That's a big step.
So that was something that kind of came out just for our victims to be able to come in and talk to us.
Is that just here at the hospital, or is that
nope,
more?
That's a national level.
National. I thought so. Okay. And that's recent? How recent?
I would say probably in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So they cannot, so, like even with people that are coming from different countries that don't have, valid visas or whatever, they don't have to worry about, we're going to turn them in and they're going to get arrested for this and this and that. It doesn't matter.
Let's talk a little bit more about forensic nursing. I feel like we just kind of, we were gliding over that a bit.
Sure.
Day to day, what does your job entail? I mean, there's probably a whole heck of a lot.
Well, so my job here really doesn't, because we're such a smaller community, and I don't know that anybody really realizes how much resources we have to offer. There isn't a lot that goes with forensic nursing here. When I'm at my other job, I tend to be a lot more. I see multiple.
That's in the cities?
Yep. So I see, anywhere from 3 to 7 cases a weekend. Where of, patients that are coming in with domestic violence, sexual abuse, like I said, lots of different things. So my job here has really been trying to push for more education though, and getting more out into the community, giving a voice to these people, because nobody thinks that, oh, I was sexually assaulted, I need to go to the ER, And so we're trying to do more education out there. We know things are happening. We're just not seeing that so much. The other thing that we're really working on too is, so we had what was called a SART team. So a sexual assault response team, which involved our law enforcement, which involved hospital, which involved our crisis intervention out of Mason City. And so that we would come as a team and to be able to know how to handle these cases better and have kind of a structured response. And so that all of the law enforcement and everybody could kind of respond the same way and make it definitely more trauma informed care for these patients, so that we're not re-victimizing them or making it so that they have to tell their story, 20 million times. So that kind of COVID kind of knocked that team out. But we started just recently reestablishing again, but this time we've got a bigger vision where we're not just for sexual assault, because we really do see other cases, when it comes to the domestic violences and the child abuse cases, and just trying to be more of a community, which we also did get our ambulance involved in it too. So that way, if they were to come up on a patient that was assaulted somehow, that their response is going to be just a little bit different. and how they talk to that patient, and making it so that really the only people that are asking those type of questions are only law enforcement and medical. So that way we're not re-victimizing our patients by making them tell their story.
Is there a time period that someone should be coming? Obviously you want to go in if you're assaulted in some way, but is there a time period where it's like, no, you shouldn't? Is it within 24 hours? Or it's like, it happened 2 days ago, I shouldn't go?
Oh gosh, no. So for what I tell people is come anytime. If I'm going to be collecting evidence from you, we can collect evidence up to 120 hours, so 5 days. And with kids, it's a little bit different because we can only collect evidence up to 72 hours after the assault. And so that's where sometimes it gets kind of tricky, where with a kiddo and the parents will say something like, well, I think this may have happened or this may have happened, unless we have a real definite, 72 hours, it kind of makes it a little tougher. And then usually with those cases that we really don't know, we have to send them to Waterloo so that they can go to the Child Protection Center there for their forensic interview and whatnot. But for any case, for a sexual assault, like I said, we have up to 5 days afterwards that we can still collect evidence. In fact, they're even trying to, I was at a conference the other day where they're trying to push it to 7 days because they did actually find some evidence on somebody 7 days after an assault. So there's a big push to kind of there. So is that maybe because the technology is getting better? It is, yeah.
What kind of technology is involved?
So for us, we have our standard, we have a sexual assault kit that just has swabs in it. We can actually send some of the clothing to our DCI here, which is our lab. What's kind of nice is recently in the last year, they started a program so that patients can actually track their kits. And so they know from where it starts out, and all the different places that it goes through. What kind of makes it tricky is if a patient comes in and they just want a kit taken and they don't want to report to law enforcement, that kit really doesn't go anywhere. It stays at the police station. If they do report to law enforcement, then it goes to, first it goes to law enforcement, then it'll go to our crime lab, which we only have one in the state. And so, there's a lot of media going about the backlogs of kits and whatnot. And unfortunately, which is tough, is those kits then get tested and then they get put into what's called CODIS. And so that's kind of a tracking for any DNA so that they can kind of track to see if these people have had other assaults that have happened. Where there's lots of work that's going on is these kits that are just sitting there untested. And so I know that there's a real big push to try to test every single kit, but unfortunately that has not gone through yet. So, I just read an article not that long ago where somebody in Iowa just got put to jail for something that happened 10 years ago. And it was because the kit probably sat untested for a long time. And then when they went to go back and they found that kit and tested it, he had other multiple convictions against him. So I know that we're really trying to push that. The one good thing about Iowa too is that we are one of the few states that there is no age. If a child abuse case, sexual abuse case had happened, there's no statute of limitations to that for reporting purposes, which is great. Scary for me because if I get called for a case, 20 years from now, I'm hoping I'm still, can remember it.
You'll have some notes, I think.
Of course, there's a lot of charting that's involved. Yeah. But that's one of the few states that, or we are one of the few states that actually have pushed that through, which is phenomenal because a lot of kids, it takes a really long time for them to report as an adult or want to report something like that. So that was kind of good.
So obviously this podcast bring awareness, talk about warning signs, what's going on in the community, finding out about you, a lot of good stuff. So I'm going to leave it open to you, kind of some final thoughts, anything that we missed that you'd want to talk about. or anything you want to reiterate to folks that are watching or maybe watching in the future?
So a lot of things, you know, nobody is immune to any of these type of things from happening to them. There are help, there is resources. If you see something that doesn't look right, do something about it. I mean, if you're sitting at a gas station, you see some young girl hopping in the back of a cab, that's probably not a good situation. Call 911. You have no idea whose life you could be saving. There's lots of hotlines. One of the things that, you know, I urge people is really look into this stuff. So for example, the Polaris Project is huge for human trafficking. If you were to look at the state of Iowa, you'll find out we're not immune to this. In fact, it's kind of scary how much we are not immune to this. I mean, we're close to the interstates. We're close to, you know, some big towns. A lot of sporting events, a lot of, you know, the Super Bowl is one of the biggest human trafficking things out there, you know, so concerts, whatever, if something doesn't look right, call it in, call 911. You know, watch for if just symptoms, or not symptoms, but looking for things. You know, if you're seeing somebody that's quite older that, you know, is too affectionate with some little kids or something, question it. If you're seeing abuse, you know, happening in front of you, call it in. If you're seeing, you know, I just feel like a lot of times people are so afraid to do anything about anything that they see because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them. But you have no idea what's going on, you know, that somebody could end up dead because of something that you didn't do or say.
I'm just surprised so much by, I think human trafficking has been going on forever. Mm-hmm. And we're finally, I think, admitting, hey, this is what's going on. We need to stop it. I mean, ultimately, how do you stop it? I mean, it's,
you know, to me, I don't know that we're ever going to stop it, but if I can get one person out of it, or if I can save one person out of it, then I'm okay with that. You know, I could save one person's life with it. It's kind of cool to see that people are finally starting to take it a little serious. I know in the state of Iowa, they're going through all the hotels and making them do certain training. In the bar situation, they're making them do certain trainings, what to look for and to watch for. So it's finally getting to be like, this is, you know, this is something we need to look at. Again, I don't know that we're ever going to stop it, but if we could get one person to be saved from it, then my job's done.
And we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of really good information for that. Anywhere we can kick people for future, any websites?
Yep. So obviously, if you're, you know, looking for human trafficking for information, that's the Polaris Project, or there's a human trafficking hotline. There is also a text option called Be Free that you can just text Be Free and then help, and then it gets you to that resource for human trafficking, obviously calling 911. For our team here, so we actually have our own email address, we have our own phone number, and it's a place where people can call and ask questions. So our phone number here is 641-732-6096. I had to think about that. And then, you know, that's not an emergent number, but it's more of a number that somebody can safely call and ask for questions or ask questions for. If people like email better, we have our own email, which is the MCRHC.art at mercyhealth.com. And again, it's not an emergent number, email, anything like that. It's a Monday through Friday, 7 to 5 number. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing is if an assault had occurred, we want you to just come to the ER. We're on call 24/7. There's always somebody here that will call us. If I'm not here, I've got 2 other nurses that are on my team.
And you're on call 24/7.
Pretty much. Pretty much. And so, we try to come. One of us will always show up here no matter what. It doesn't matter time, day, holiday, weekend, whatever. just because we know, that there's always going to be a need no matter what. So there's always one of us around.
2 more points I wanted to make. And number one, I wanted to bring up the TikTok, one thing that went viral, the universe, the hand signal. What is that, by the way?
So what it's supposed to be is like somebody that's entrapped. So this is how they do it, where it's they're trapped somehow. And so, I've seen that one. I have seen where they used to put a dot on their hand too, and they do one of these so that people can try to find that. Not everybody always knows what this means, but, if something doesn't look right, call it in.
Lastly, we're getting around the holidays.
We are.
There's a lot of different assaults that happen. It can be domestic, it can be sexual, it can be whatever.
Yeah.
What can you tell folks maybe for prevention or to watch out for?
The biggest thing is, we do see our numbers obviously going up around the holidays because there's a lot of stress that's involved with holidays. Again, even with COVID, our numbers, in other states have doubled or tripled for domestic assaults because there's always some kind of a stress that's involved with whatever is going on. And so preventative wise, when it comes to with some of these things, I don't know how to, really say that just because I don't know what sets people off. I don't know if it's just because of that extra stress and holidays and family and chaos and whatnot. One of the things that I will say is, be very careful of your surroundings, being very careful of who you are with in situations. Not that anybody deserves to be hurt in any situation. That's not what I mean. But just being a little extra mindful that, being in a certain bar on a holiday night might not be the best thought, or being with the certain people that I'm with may not be your best option, and just being very mindful of who you're with and what your surroundings look like.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Jess Clayton, Mitchell County Regional Health Center, one of 5 forensic nurses, correct, with all these stipulations and diplomas attached, right?
With certifications, yeah.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you. You as well.